Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of What the FinTech, the podcast from the team behind FinTech Futures and the Banking Technology magazine. My name is Paul Hindle, editor of FinTech Futures, and as we approach the end of what has been another eventful year in FinTech, it's once again time for our annual end-of-year review, where we take a look back at some of the big trends to come out of 2025 and what areas to keep an eye on as we head into 2026. Just to quickly mention for our regular listeners, this will be the final episode of this year, and we'll be back early next year with season 7 of the show. And I'd just like to say once again a big thank you to all of our guests this year and of course you listening at home. And we look forward to bringing you plenty more insights from the wonderful world of financial services in the years ahead. So as we record this now, it's now mid-December and the final embers of 2025 are beginning to fade as the new year rolls into view. And to cast an eye on the year that was, I'm joined by our now annual end of season guests, and they are of course regular FinTech Futures columnists and hosts of the popular Dave and Dharm Demystified podcast, Dave Wallace and Dharmesh Mistry. Gentlemen, how are you both?
Very well. I like the fact that you talk about the embers of the year. I'm sort of feeling like it's time for a holiday, to be honest.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm doing really well and looking forward to winding down for Christmas. It's been a fun year so far.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I guess on that front, I know I've spoken to you both plenty of times over the year, but how's your 2025 been, Dharmesh? Maybe we can start with you with that.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So I tried to kind of semi-retire, continued the writing, obviously, but a couple of things have come up which have been like really interesting. So I have joined as the UK chair of Open Core OS, and I wish I was 20 years younger to do stuff like that. And I think it's a really interesting time for startups. So I genuinely wish I was 20, 30 years younger, and I would be definitely doing another startup. But given that I don't quite have the energy or the years to do that anymore, joining one that's doing something exciting is just as good.
Nice. Sounds good. How about you, Dave?
So a very interesting year. So like Dharmesh, occasionally think about retiring and then sort of retreat from that idea. So this year I sort of ventured beyond financial services. So I've been working with a Viennese startup, doing some interesting work with them. And great news for us is I've just managed to secure a kind of big partnership with a big property platform in the US for them. And very interesting business, but my heart is still very much in the financial services sector. I love spending time with Dharmesh. We've done some really interesting podcasts over the year. And obviously we continue to both write for FinTech Futures, which is an absolute honor and privilege. So thank you very much for having us both on that as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you both again from myself and the wider FinTech Futures team as well for all of your contributions over the years. I know both we and the readers of the website take a lot away from your articles and the podcast as well. And there's always plenty of great insights there. So a big thank you from us as well. And thank you both for joining me for the podcast again today. Now, for the last 2 years, when we've done these end of year review episodes, we've kicked off by focusing on a little thing called AI. And while this year, I think stablecoins has arguably been the topic du jour of 2025, why break the habit of a lifetime? AI is still everywhere. A lot of the talk these days focusing on agentic AI in particular. So we'll get to stablecoins shortly, but to kick things off, AI then, another 12 months down the line in financial services, what are the big trends you're seeing there? Dharmesh, maybe we can start with you for that one.
I recently just came back from the FT Banking Summit, and for those that haven't been, I highly recommend it because you get the CEOs of all of the top UK banks, so Barclays, NatWest, HSBC, Lloyds. And the big change this year was the sentiment that banking was not in a defensive mode anymore. And certainly now trading above order book value, which essentially means they're profitable and growing. They are looking forward to innovation and really driving some change. So like I said, it's not a defensive change. This is about reimagining business. And it's the first time I'm hearing that from CEOs of banks. And I think fundamentally, most of that next year is going to obviously come from AI. I think what we've all experienced so far is personal gain. We managed to book our holidays that little bit quicker. We've done reviews of things that we wanted to buy that little bit quicker. We've had the comparisons done for us, the recommendations, etc. So we've all personally gained from this. But this year was a game changer in terms of people seeing that actually in, like, I think the year before last, people questioned whether we'd get AI to write code. This year, if you hadn't done it, you're already behind. Next year, you're into now the banks are talking about undertaking the projects, reviewing all the stuff that they've done in the past and saying, well, those things were really scary and massive, like, doing a core rewrite or core replacement. But they were really massive and scary. But with AI, we probably will have a go at this now, right? It's going to be cheaper, faster, quicker, and quite arguably easier to do with something a bit more intelligent. So it's interesting. I think the biggest impact to companies will start to emerge next year. I think we've seen the personal gain this year, but for next year, companies will be, I think, doing some interesting stuff. I don't think we'll see a jobs impact necessarily because I think people be redeployed, but I think that is inevitable in the midterm future. What do you think, Dave?
I think it's really interesting. I think Dharmesh and I have talked about the fact we lived through the dot-com bubble and bust and the similarity in terms of feelings around that. And I think the difference for me here is that when we lived through the dot-com bubble, there just wasn't an audience out there. So, anybody could kind of run a slide rule over the figures from a kind of audience perspective and just go, it's not there yet. Whereas for AI, you can kind of tangibly see the difference it's starting to make. So it feels slightly different. And yet what is interesting is the kind of normalization. So one of the things I think is really interesting as we head into the end of 25 into 26 is actually the conversation has sort of shifted gear. We've gone from being awestruck to how do we kind of normalize this? And it's interesting because there was a post on LinkedIn, which is really worth sharing. And Dharmesh actually, he sent it to me today, but I was going to talk about it anyway. So it shows you that we're really on a kind of level about these things. But Lloyd's, through a friend of mine, Suresh Balaji, who's the CMO at Lloyd's, and Ogilvy One have just run a test where they had 3 ring-fenced teams. One was human only, one was AI only, and one was human and AI. And they had independent judges judging a campaign from everything from strategic alignment to creative output to human insight and empathy to efficiency. And what's deeply fascinating is that the human plus AI team won hands down. But what's deeply fascinating is just how well AI did. And I think if they'd run that test kind of 12 months ago, the result would have been very different. And what you can see is that actually it's sort of seeping in now. It's seeping into jobs. And it's interesting what Dharmesh says about, I think we'll start seeing jobs starting to sort of hemorrhage a bit as people get their heads around the fact that actually AI is really capable and increasingly capable. But I think what's interesting is that normalization. So it used to be, as I say, we were all like, oh my God, AI. Now it's just part of the kind of vernacular for us.
I think the other thing that came out in that study that was fascinating for me, Dave, is, and this is entirely your bag, is that this thing about trust. We've all understand that there are bad guys out there and there are all these, like the scams are getting cleverer. The deep fakes are getting cleverer. And so what becomes more important is trust. And one of the amazing things I think that was coming out of Lloyd's was that actually they're building a brand around the feeling of trust. And in the end, if you can't trust what you're interacting with, what do you lean on? It's going to be the brand. And so I can see a massive growth in companies investing on their brand and really working out what those values are so that people can say, well, look, there's so much stuff out there. I just pick this brand because, it resonates with the stuff that I believe in. And I think that's always been the case. But I think what is interesting to me is that AI is making it even more important, not less important. You kind of think that you've got this super intelligence that'll give you the best advice, but we still have a bit of doubt. And I think we will still lean back on brands. What do you think?
Well, I mean, 100% agree. One of the things I've been pondering is, who do you trust? And I think there's a few things at play. I totally agree. I mean, I think there's an opportunity for banks to re-engage with customers around that trust, because I think at the end of the day, what is a bank? It's a place which ultimately we believe is secure with our money, and then it's very good at moving integers from one spreadsheet to another. Trust is a fundamental part of a bank. So it's great to hear that people like Lloyds are recognizing that, because I think increasingly when we look at content, I mean, I'm not even sure half the content I read, whether it's real or not. It's getting to the point where, as you say, AI is so good that we can't, with that spidey sense of, has this been created by a machine or a person, is kind of disappearing. And actually, I'm not sure that really matters. What we need is that sort of sense of trust in the truth. And I think it's not just companies that need to really think about this and trade off their brands, it's countries as well. So I was actually talking to someone last week about a nation state where that actually they believe that AI can help citizens, but one of the barriers that they see to that is, how do they get citizens to trust the AI? And I think it's a really interesting dilemma. So yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the things it forces companies to do is to go back to understanding themselves as a business, what they truly stand for. Because I think, and we've talked about this before, Dharmesh, is AI strips everything back to bare essentials. So machines can see through the BS, basically. And we as people, through the machines, can see through that BS. So I think the re-emergence of branding's importance will be one of the big trends, actually, of 2026, which I know is something that you kind of agree with.
Yeah. Before we go on to the topic of stablecoins, kind of like the bridge between that, I think there is an increasing talk about everyone needs to have a wallet and the importance of wallets. And we kind of think that's a money thing. I think that the UK banks have underestimated their role in a wallet. And I think the likes of JP Morgan probably are going to run away with kind of innovators' advantage with data in the wallet. Because I think this is the next big thing, is that we would want to, at the moment, our data is everywhere. And the best way to centralize this, or the best way to get control of it again, is for you to own the data itself. And the easiest way that can happen is if you can put that data into your own wallet as such, and then you already have the mechanisms to say who can have access to it or not, and change those permissions wherever you want to. You don't have to go to 25 different sites and change the permissions there. You can do it in one central place in the wallet for every app that stores data with you. So I think this is potentially the biggest missed opportunity in the UK retail banks. And I kind of think only JP Morgan has got a very solid view on this.
It's really interesting. And before we move on to stablecoins and other topics, Dharm, I know in your column you've been covering a lot about the single brain in banking driven by AI. How do you see the future of banking shaping up as the AI train continues to roll on then, and as the wallet trend that you've mentioned there picks up more steam as well?
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting because I think, look, another announcement at the FT Banking Awards is that Lloyds is going to launch their consumer AI next year. It's already in trials with staff. People I've spoken to give it rave reviews. So I'm intrigued as to what it's actually going to do. But clearly, one of the things it can do is scale the solutions to some of the problems that we've had in the past, like financial literacy, like financial inclusion, like just helping people with their money better. When we had to rely on people to do that, we just couldn't scale it because it wasn't consistent advice that we were providing. We spoke to Helena Wardle at Money Means. She's already got an AI that's providing financial advice and passed the UK examinations for financial advisors with scores in the 90s, whereas the average is like in the 70s for a human. So we're going to see, I guess, for next year, first incarnations of these personal banking assistants that will help us to manage our money. And essentially, that's really what the single brain was all about, was how do we leverage the intelligence in the data to kind of start making decisions and providing advice, whereas we couldn't do it in the silos. It's going to be really interesting. Those people that see the bigger picture around the single brain will, I think, be first out with advice, with personal banking assistance. And by all accounts, I think Lloyd's will be the first example of it.
Just to add, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about agentic this year as well. And I think the sort of finance agent, that's a big thing, which I think will kind of continue to evolve over 26, 27. And I think the other thing is this sort of road to AGI, or artificial general intelligence. That's still there in the background, is how smart are these things? And I think what we are seeing is, as time goes on, it's not a kind of trick, basically. These things are getting smarter. They're more and more able to kind of help and support us. So I think in 26, 27, the technology's there to be able to deliver some really rich and brilliant customer experiences. So it'd be interesting to see the Lloyd's chatbot. It's just whether the banks are brave enough to kind of grab the opportunity to do it, and also whether the economics stack up. Because one of the things that we talked about, Dharmesh, is friction is the way that banks make money. And what we're talking about is potentially a frictionless future. So they may have to rethink their business model slightly.
Yeah, I mean, just on the AGI point, Dave, I think one of the premises of the single brain was that it's the notion of a single thing, whereas actually underneath the skin, it's actually zillions of agents all interacting with each other. It's an agentic platform in that we'll have an agent that specializes in credit risk. We'll have an agent that specializes in AML, in fraud detection, in cybersecurity, etc. And I think it'll be a long time yet before we'll get a single AGI that will be the best at all of those things. I think what we saw this year was the emergence of these specialized smaller models with very narrow focus, but much higher precision at what they do. And I think that will be the case for some time yet, because it's easier to kind of build these smaller models with specializations, and then we'll talk about this a little bit later, but have some orchestration that string these agents together and some overarching kind of view to say, well, look, this is more important to sort out now than this. Like, it might be better to really progress with a fraud investigation before seizing a sales opportunity, whatever it is. But I think increasingly we're going to see specialized agents as part of a makeup of the single brain. And why I kind of talked about the brain in the first place is it's exactly how our own brain works. We have areas of the brain that are specialized for specific capabilities, and we're just literally replicating that in technology.
Amazing.
Excellent. I think we could probably do a full episode on this, but I will try and move us on to the next one. We'll have to see. I mean, it's such exciting times again. I mean, you've mentioned there, Dave, the kind of steps that have been, or the jump that's been made over the last 12 months. It'll be interesting, like I say, if we do this again next year, what the jump will have been by the end of 2026.
We'll probably all be in a muddy field because the AI's taken over and marched us off. So hopefully not.
Yeah, fingers crossed, yeah.
On that, one thing that did kind of really get me thinking was Sam Altman on an interview saying, we're not quite sure how this plays out. So I think if one of the architects of AI has uncertainty, it makes me think that we should all, I don't know, there's no surety about where it all ends, which is kind of fascinating.
I just want to jump in with a little bit, is that I know this is a fintech show and that's our focus, and David and I spent a lot of time with banks. On the flip side for AI is the amazing progress that has been made, not only by Demis Habbissis, but other people as well in the medical field. We are going to see cures and resolutions to problems that we've never dreamt of being able to do with just human power. And if we have to trade people living better for giving away some data, well, then, have all of my data now. The only question is, I guess in the banking side of things, if we can scale inclusion and literacy and the things that really matter to most of us, then great. But if it's about making a few people richer, then, I don't know how that plays out.
That's interesting. And it's well said as well. I mean, sometimes, like you say, obviously this is a fintech show. Sometimes we can have the fintech blinkers on in terms of what it is that AI is doing, but it's good to kind of have the context of what is going on elsewhere as well. But let's move on anyway. As I mentioned, we probably could do a whole episode on this, but let's move on to, as mentioned at the start of the show, one of the breakout stars of 2025, and that's stablecoins. Been around for a while now, but this year there's been a really huge surge in popularity. So it'd be interesting to get your takes on this then. What's really driving that stablecoin boom? What's the main use cases that you're seeing there? I mean, Dan, what's your take on that?
This time last year, literally, we were talking and writing about almost 100 countries plowing the fields towards central bank digital currencies. And that looked set to be the way forward. Then Trump happened, and suddenly all bets were off. The game changer event was the 3 acts that they put through in June, July. One, banning the digital dollar. So effectively saying the US is not going to do a CBDC. We're banning it. That, for me, was just mind-blowing. The second thing was the Genius Act to approve stable coins as a means for value exchange and supporting that. And off the back of that, there's been a ton of ETFs supporting various other crypto coins, etc. So I think the real game changer was the acts that were passed in the US, because clearly countries were going down the CBDC route. They've all had to do a U-turn, in effect. The UK has finally tried to catch up with the US, I guess, with some legislation through the FCA and the Bank of England now supporting stable coins. So there was one event that triggered it all off. But it's going to be interesting, because if we look at what the benefits of stablecoins are, near zero cost, instantaneous transfer of money, non-proprietary, literally it's internet money. It's using the internet to transfer, not a proprietary telecoms network and proprietary a set of agreed standards through SWIFT and blah, blah, blah. Even SWIFT is now questioning its role and saying, well, actually, maybe our role is about trust in payments. So much as AI has had all the headlines, the understated star of 2025 is stablecoins.
Can I ask, Dharm, because I mean, you're much better able to talk about stablecoins than me. So Trump made one move. Could someone else come along and make another move and then reverse stablecoins back to CBDCs, do you think? Or
no, I think that the biggest concern about CBDCs is that it's programmable money in the end. When we move to a digital currency, it's programmable. And if that programmable money is issued by a central bank, then everyone should be worried, because literally at the push of a button, your money could be taken from your account. And before all the people say, oh, yeah, but why would the government do that? Well, in World War II, that's exactly what they did. They instructed the banks to say, anyone with over a certain amount, we need to have that money so we can fund this war campaign. And we could be in another world war, and the last thing we need is somebody being able to push the button to take out our money. So I think there's been, yes, it could be reversed, but the thing that drives stablecoins adoptance, apart from the benefits, is the fact that it isn't controlled by the government.
It's interesting because, as you say, what that does is it kind of opens the door for basically peer-to-peer payments at kind of industrial scale. So the likes of Visa and MasterCard and Swift, as you say, become potentially less relevant in the future of payments. And it's interesting because one of the things I've been pondering is like the importance of payments and payments infrastructure and what's going on in payments. And I did start thinking payments is going to become it in many ways. And is payments going to eat banking? So do payments companies or stablecoin companies, do they become the sort of next big brands of the future because they enable the sort of payments infrastructure? So I don't know what the answer is, but do you have any thoughts around that?
I think the stable coins themselves will be much more like what banking should have been, something that happens in the background. You don't really care whether it's a USDC or a USDT or whatever flavor of stablecoin you want. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. What you care is that when you send money, it costs you very little, it's guaranteed, and it happens instantaneously. That's what you care about. So how it happens should be irrelevant. We don't worry about how the electricity is sent through copper wires or whatever it is before it gets to our house. We worry about whether we've got light and heat. And the same thing needs to happen with money. I think what we'll see next year is big corporates adopting stable coins internally first, I would imagine, because why would I want to use a bank to send money to my different offices around the world if I can do it at a fraction of the cost with guaranteed delivery within seconds? I mean, if you're a corporate treasurer and you're not looking at stable coins, more the fool you, right? You're just losing money to banks. Once companies work out how to make themselves more cost effective with stable coins, they'll start to extend that out potentially to staff. Like if I was Amazon, I would incentivize my staff to take the Amazon coins as payment. Then I reduce my bills with, let's say, the cost of doing payroll globally. And then you can say, well, look, once they're doing it, well, why wouldn't my merchants, why won't I incentivize the merchants to take payment via stable coins? Because it costs me less. I'm going to do less and less through the bank now, right? And more myself. And then eventually, if the merchants are on board, then it's the consumer. So I think the benefits will flow through and it will be a very, very different kind of environment. I mean, this is fundamentally ripping the guts out of payments, I think. Maybe I overstate it, right? But I am looking not just about what happens next year, but in the next 2 to 5 years. I think digital money is going to revolutionize a lot of stuff. And this is why it's really important for banks to really sit back and understand what their role is going to be. Not just think about the experience of the future, but what is our role as banks?
No, and I think that then bleeds back into the whole conversation about trust and AI and all the other bits and pieces. So, but it's the thing I then worry about with what you've just said is it's handing more power potentially to the tech companies. So I don't know if you've watched Alien Earth, which is that series that's been on, I can't remember what channel it was on, but the thing that really stood out for me on that was that the world was ruled by 7 large corporations. And what you've just described in terms of Amazon hands Amazon enormous power in terms of sort of finances. So I can see it. It makes perfect sense from a kind of friction, shareholder, everybody. But is it good for humanity to then have power actually coalescing around the companies that would do it? And it is going to be the big tech companies.
This is why I say the wallet's quite important, because if the wallet is the container for your data, not just your money. I mean, I think too many people associate wallets with money. But if it is your money and your data, and you're free to take that wherever you want to, then suddenly the tech providers have to compete on what they're going to give back for your data. Like how good a service can they provide, given that you own the data? And I think increasingly we're going to see this kind of like giving back the data, because I would dearly love The only reason I don't move from my Garmin watch is because they've got my data. I've now found a trick as to how to move this data, but it's effort on my behalf. I can imagine very soon I just have to tell an agent, oh, look, I want to switch from Garmin to Sunto. So take my data to Sunto, but I don't want it to be just Sunto watches. I want like my health ring. I want all of my data to do with my health in one place. And actually, my health also links in with financial services, because when I'm well, I'm probably spending more. When I'm not so well, let's say I don't go out anywhere, so I'm spending less, etc. There are linkages between the data and not just money and health, but this comes back to a notion that I wrote about some time ago about the quantified self. It's about all of your data in one place to do everything for you, not just banking or traveling or whatever, the silos.
Amazing.
Right. So keeping an eye on the time, we'll move on from stablecoins now. Then I will open the floor for some other topics of discussion. So what are some of the other big innovations or trends in banking and financial services that you're looking forward to as we head into 2026? And Dave, is there anything in particular you'd like to cover?
One of the areas I've been writing about is on neurodiversity, and actually how I don't think the industry has really tackled neurodiversity enough. And so what I think will happen is that Dharme's already talked about AI from a kind of advice point of view, but I think increasingly there will be an understanding that actually you can deliver brilliant experiences to people in very different ways with the same data, because they understand information and data in very different ways. And I think actually the door opens to huge opportunities, I think, for banks and other finance companies. And I've just written an article where it's kind of interesting because, like, amongst the entrepreneurial community, there's a higher degree of neurodiversity than outside of it. So a lot of new money is actually generated by people with neurodiversity. And that is often not taken into account when kind of wealth managers or banks are sort of looking at kind of delivering products and services to those people. So by actually starting to deliver products and services which these people understand more fully, I think it opens up huge opportunities. And I think going back to what you talked about in terms of brands, I think if a bank can see through its brand a way to kind of reach people through using AI and all the other bits and pieces, I think it will really stand out. So it's exciting because none of this stuff was possible before. So when Dharmesh talks about the digital brain, I love it because it means that the opportunities to deliver things in different ways is there, as long as it's all based on the same kind of data. So I think that for me is a big yawning opportunity. And it kind of marries with the zeitgeist moment, actually, of people understanding that we're all kind of somewhere on a spectrum, to be honest. So, we all exist. No, there isn't such a thing as normal. So I think it's really interesting and good.
Do you think, Dave, that is like a form of personalization? And I guess I'm like moving away from the word personalization to specialization, so that there is an agent that kind of understands neurodiversity and how to apply it to financial services. Similar, there is an agent that understands, I guess, any other challenges that people might have, let's say with literacy, etc.
It's a very good question. And I see it slightly differently in that, actually the opportunity is for hyper-personalization, where like ChatGPT already knows that it turns out a lot about me. So when it responds to me, it always says, because you did what, or because you asked for X, Y, and Z. So it's learning more and more about me. I don't think you will have a kind of neurodiversity agent. I think you'll just have an agent which begins to understand you and how you interpret and understand information. I'd really encourage the industry, when it thinks about AI, to really focus on that it's something they should do, but it's a huge opportunity for them. And I think it then bleeds into everything you talked about around trust. like banks really could become the guardians of trust going forward, because at the moment, I'm not sure who else would fill that gap.
Well, how about you, Dharmesh, then? Is there any big trends that you're looking forward to in 2026?
I think we're going to see our first personal banking assistant. I'm looking forward to that. Also, we're going to start to see, I guess, what I would call AI first interfaces. So what we've done in the past has been augment AI into the organization and to the user experiences. So quite typically like a chatbot that lived within your mobile banking application. I think we're going to go to a world where actually the AI is the UI. It's the natural interface that we move to. So we won't lose all of our screens, but they'll be embedded into the chat as opposed to having a mobile banking application. I actually think we're going to move away from internet and mobile banking. So where mobile banking is our primary interface of the bank, I think we're going to start to see next year the emergence of people moving towards an AI first conversation with their bank.
Thank you so much again for joining me for this end of season podcasting, and Dave and Dom. And as hinted at earlier in the show, it's now time for our FinTech Jail segment. So in the spirit of the season, what we usually do at this time of year is allow you both to not only lock away, but also free some of the terms that are in the jail as well. So Dharmesh, let's start with you then. Maybe we can start with the word that you are locking up this year.
I'm going to look up chatbot because I think chatbots were in place. I guess they've been around for over a decade. And quite frankly, they've not delivered the goods. So they deserve to go in jail. What comes back and what overtakes them is a personal banking assistant. It's not a chatbot. And so even though we are typing in maybe to talk to our personal banking assistant initially, I think increasingly we'll just get used to just using our voice rather than having to type anyway. And so I think chatbots deserve to go into jail because they literally have not really delivered.
On this topic, I was going to mention during the conversation we had earlier on AI, but it'd be nice to get to a point with AI where chatbots in general can actually solve the question that you're asking rather than just regurgitating the FAQs. Because from my experience, whenever I'm getting in touch with customer services, it's usually because the problem I have is quite niche or needs a fair bit of explaining. And I've already checked the FAQs and I'm still just waiting to be put through to a human agent who can actually understand what it is that I'm asking and sort me out. So I'm more than happy to throw chatbot into the jail this year. And what would be the word or term that you want to free from the jail this year then, Dharmesh?
I want to free orchestration. I know it's a term that's been around for some time. The reason why I want to free it is I think it probably, was a term that was overused in the API generation, but it deserves to come back out because it's very core to creating a single brain. So basically the orchestration allows you to get agents to feed off each other. And that's going to be, like I say, is absolutely key. It's like our spinal cord for joining up all of the intelligence that we have in the organization. So I think orchestration is central to an agentic platform and deserves to be reborn or freed.
Sounds good. I was wondering whether orchestration would be in there for forever now since it went in. So it's nice that, like I say, as the technology evolves and the words come back out of the jail again, so they have a new lease of life almost. So that's good. Excellent. Okay, sounds great. So Dave, we will move on to you then. Which word do you want to be freeing then from the jail this year?
So I want to free quantum supremacy because I think it's very much on the table, this whole notion of Q-Day and quantum supremacy. I think our friends and colleagues in the world of quantum are quietly beavering away, and, you got fridges humming and lasers sort of tweezering or whatever they do. And I think 2026 is going to see some big moves in the world of quantum. So I had the pleasure actually recently of listening to Andrew Briggs, who's one of the professors at Oxford, talking about quantum. And, his view is that we're probably looking at quantum supremacy within the next 10 years. So yeah, I think it's time. It's probably been in only a short time, but it really needs to be out, I think, and freed.
Yeah, that's fair. I think he was put in the jail last year, maybe. So it's had a good year in there, I think, at the moment. But I know we were talking about the potentially AI bringing it into society, but maybe with the mix of AI and quantum in the next few years might be the.
Well, I mean, I guess one of the things Dharmesh and I have been banging on around is this whole idea of limitless, and I think quantum AI, some of the moves that are happening from a kind of energy point of view, the world is pointing to this limitless sort of place. And I think you're right. The sort of marriage of quantum and AI probably is the key that unlocks AGI eventually.
Yeah, excellent. It's a really interesting space. And for anyone listening, obviously we don't have time at the end of this podcast now, as we've been talking for quite a while. But if anyone is interested in the topic, I know Dave and Dharmesh have done a few podcasts on this topic now as well. Dave, you've been writing a few articles as well. So feel free to check out the FinTech Futures website. We've got plenty of content on quantum and what might be coming around the corner with Q-Day for sure. So just to finish off then, Dave, what is the word then you want to be throwing into the jail this week?
Well, I think it's already in there, but I think we need to extend its time inside in Old Chokey. It's fintech. I mean, I think, come on, it's time to just retire it. Honestly, it's not cool to be a fintech bro these days or still or whatever. We should just be in financial services.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with retiring it fully is that we're going to need a rebrand at some point.
Well, that's what Dharmesh and I are hoping. So come in with some AI and do some rebranding for you. So
I see the game, guys. I see it.
I hadn't thought it through. Gosh, I know. Get it back.
Really key.
Yeah. I guess my point is less around the label, more that I think the industry has to be careful it doesn't become tired. I mean, one of the brilliant things about stepping out of the industry and being able to look back in is you kind of go, there's a lot that is institutionalized into fintech in many ways. And I guess that's what needs to kind of change, is maybe a bit more of a renaissance around, what's going on. So like the topics we've talked about, actually, if you distill it down, we've talked about a massive revolution in the space in the course of an hour. So that's the stuff to, I think, really kind of embrace and focus on. I see the same old sort of discussions happening, and I think it's time to move on.
Strangely, I agree. I spent 40 years of my career trying to make sure, highlight how important technology is to banks, etc. Now it's all very important to banks. I actually think the opposite, and that's why I started at the beginning of this conversation with like this enlightened statement from Suresh about the importance of brand. But it's all the non-technical things now that are super important. And the primary one is defining your brand and defining your business. And that sounds bizarre that, well, we're a bank, we know what we do, right? But, what you're going to do in the future is going to be based on fundamentally different technology. And so you may not be the one that's facilitating the transaction. You may not be the one that's potentially even facilitating some of the credit, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the bank's role? And I think that is an important question. It's a non-technology one. And that, for me, is like amazing that we can even suggest that a bank needs to consider a different future.
Yeah, I think these are similar reasons why fintech was put in the jail in the first place. Actually, it's been there for a while now, as we've mentioned. I want to say it was one of the first words added to the jail, and nobody has wanted to break it out since. So maybe that says something in and of itself there. But we will deny its bail then this year and extend fintech's sentence in the jail for now. And that'll be it for this episode and for season 6 of the podcast. Again, a big thanks to all of you listening for your continued support. And we're already looking forward to getting started with season 7 in the new year. So keep an eye out for brand new episodes coming around the end of January and early February. And Dave and Dharm, thank you so much again for joining me for the podcast today to take a look back at the year that was and what's coming in the new year as well. Is there anything you can tell us about with the Dave and Dharm Demystified podcast and what we can look forward to in the new year there?
Oh, well, I think we continue to, plough the same furrow that we have done. And we've got some really interesting guests coming up. It's interesting you're on season 7 because we're on season 1 still, but I think somewhere along the line we forgot that we should be doing seasons. I'll blame Dharmesh for that, but we're still on season 1. One of the things which is really wonderful actually about a podcast series is being able to go back and listen to some of the original ones that we did, to actually see the success of some of the people that we've interviewed. So like I'll shout out Nala, who we interviewed Benjamin Fernandez quite early on, and they've just gone from strength to strength. So it's sort of really lovely to feel like we were there kind of as people were thinking about things. So we continue to try and provide a mix of talking to startups, interesting software companies, established businesses. And I hope people feel we've kind of got a good mix. So we certainly seem to have a lot of kind of good feedback in terms of the content that we deliver. So, but I'm very proud. And one of the things I love, or the thing I love most, is it means that I get to chat to Dharmesh at least once a week.
That's a nice note to end things on.
Yeah, I love talking to you as well, Dave. Also, I just want to say a big thank you to the FinTech Futures team on behalf of both of us for hosting the podcast. It's gone from strength to strength. And Dave and I we learn so much from these things. And we get to speak to some really smart people. So thank you for hosting the podcast and also for all your support on the articles, because I think they've got a bit spicier for me this month. But if you haven't read my prayer, please do.
I love the video as well. I mean, if you haven't seen the video, then please, I pray, go and have a look.
Maybe there'll be a bit more of the video and stuff next year. But one of the key things is by speaking, all this stuff works together. The podcast leads to some articles, some of the articles lead to some of the podcasts. It's a virtuous circle, and all the way we're learning loads. So I hope, the audience is getting the same back. But thank you to FinTech Futures for that.
Absolutely. I echo that 100%.
Well, thank you very much, guys. And again, obviously, thank you from our side for contributing, like I say, with the articles every, couple of weeks now for both of you. And it's been going since I started working here, which is now 4.5 years ago, right? So it's no small effort to be writing, like I say, articles every couple of weeks for 4.5 years. So thank you so much for the contributions. And thank you so much again for the partnering with us for the podcast as well. Like I say, it's great. And we're always a big fan of listening to the people that you chat to as well, and getting kind of amplifying the stories as well and getting that out there. So it's all great. But thank you so much again for joining me for the podcast today as well. It's been a pleasure talking to you both.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for this episode. A big thanks again to our guests, Dave and Dharmesh, and of course you, our listeners, as well, for your support across the year. As mentioned, season 7 of the podcast will return in the new year, so keep an eye out for brand new episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favourite podcasting service from January onwards. As for FinTech Futures, you can find us online at fintechfutures.com, and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to keep up with the latest FinTech news. Thanks as well to Arama for editing this podcast. You can check them out at arama.tv. And we wish all of our listeners a very happy holidays and new year. And I hope you all enjoy a well-earned break. We'll see you soon for another episode of What the FinTech in the new year. But until then, goodbye.